未来を築き上げた。これらすべてナナの炎、ナナの血である。
みんなの声が聞こえる。
正解は暗く孤独に果てはない。あるものが己を灯した。
It's just
宇
so
宙に始め
fucking
光が
big.
差した。希望を諦めはしない。
共に前へ進むために。
未来を切り開く鍵は今この手に。
Natlan, the region of Pyro, the arc where hope, sacrifice, and perseverance are put to the forefront, the arc where nobody fights alone. So Natlan just about wrapped up recently, and I've got a lot to say. Some good, some bad, but overall, it's no surprise. This is not a fucking Elden Ring Night Rain reveal, okay? I love Natlan. I think it's an amazing arc. It's very different from any other Genshin arc we've had up to this point, really, which I will explain more in detail why that's the case, and probably why it's a big reason a lot of people don't like it. But for me personally, I'm gonna explain exactly why I loved it, address some main points of criticism I've seen being thrown around on the internet, as well as what it could have done better. But if you want more extended thoughts on the first half of the story, I highly recommend checking out this video right here, link in the description down below. So what's up? Why does Natlan have such polarizing opinions compared to any other arc in the series? Well, I think the answer is simple. It deviates from what was the norm until now. Up until now, the writing style has always revolved around the characters. But with Natlan, they took a very radical shift to make it more plot-driven. And I honestly applaud them for that, because it's not every day you see a gacha game take focus away from its main selling point, which are the characters, to focus on the story instead. Of course, both of them have their own merits, but they also come with downsides as well. The downside of a plot-driven story being that it's harder to connect with the characters at hand, and I think that's the main issue people have with Natlan. But on the flip side, that laid the path to make amazing world building and lore. To me, Natlan is the more perfected execution of the story that Inazuma was trying to tell. Inazuma was more clueless than a harem protagonist getting hit on. It just did not know what to do with its story because it was trying to be a character-driven and a plot-driven story at the same time. They didn't know where to put their priorities, but here in Natlan, we see that they had one vision and they executed it really well, in my opinion. They sold on immersing us into Natlan's culture. They sold on the narrative low point when we went to war against the Abyss. They sold on the climactic showdown against Gosoithoth. And most importantly, they sold on the weight of the stakes at hand all the way through. All of which are things that the Inazuma Archon quest severely lacked. Now, the reason I'm bringing up Inazuma is because its story beats are somewhat similar to Natlan's. Both are isolated regions to the people. Both are being oppressed by an overwhelmingly powerful entity. Both of them involve wars. Well, I mean, calling Inazuma's conflict the war is about as accurate as calling myself 6 feet. Both final battles involve the need to shoulder the hopes and wishes of the people that lead to power-ups, yada yada, you get the point. However, even though both story beats are very similar across both arcs, I never found even a single ounce of weight behind our confrontation and war against the Shogunate in the same way that I did with Natlan's war against the Abyss. And that's largely because out of all the regions, I think Natlan was definitely the most consistent in its writing quality. There was no Sub-Bruce Festival, there was no Fortress of Meropite section, everything felt a lot more cohesive and streamlined. But more than that, Natlan is the only nation where we got to fight and grow alongside its people. And that's just so thematically resonant with the narrative because Natlan is built upon the premise that nobody fights alone. We got to fight and struggle alongside its people, be way more immersed into their culture, and just experience their way of life in a lot more depth compared to other nations. Take Fontaine for example. By the end of it, I only really cared for a select few characters like Navia or Farina. But did anybody actually care about the random civilians that were gonna be affected by the prophecy? I don't think so, but with Natlan that's not the case, at least not for me. And outside of the main Archon quest, a big contributing factor to that were the tribal quests and the world quests, which helped teach us a lot more about Natlan's culture and history. I mean, just the existence of these tribal quests instead of character story quests is irrefutable proof that Hoyoverse is prioritizing the world rather than the characters for Natlan. Now, was it tropey? Yeah, but is that necessarily a bad thing? No, I think that's fine as long as the execution is good. At that point, it'll just come down to preference. And while I do prefer character-driven stories more, which is why I still have Fontaine and Sumeru ahead of it, I still think that Natlan was a much-needed breath of fresh air that got really close to perfecting the shonen formula for an open-world anime game. Now, I've seen some people throw out the criticism that this story is bad because it utilizes the power of friendship. First of all, the power of friendship didn't do jack shit in Act 4, so many people still fucking died. But aside from that, the power of friendship isn't even bad on its own, it's just a theme. What matters is how it's executed and utilized within the context of the story. And I just don't see how Natlan did it poorly, because there were sacrifices made, there were people that died, people that gave up their lives fighting for their cause. It's not like because of the power of friendship everybody got off scot-free. It is pretty hard for a plot-driven narrative to invoke the same emotional highs of a character-driven one, and though it didn't provide ones as cathartic as Folklore's Sacrifice or Rukkhadevata's, it went for a different emotion which is much more fitting for the nation of Pyro in my opinion. Whereas water and nature can be seen as more mellow and emotional, Natlan, fire, went for something more exciting, and I really appreciate that. However, it wouldn't be nearly as good as it is without the amazing world building it was able to achieve throughout its patches. That honestly is my favorite part about Natlan, because this has been the most I've cared about a region since the game first launched. Yeah, its Archon quest might not be as good as the last two in my opinion, but they just knocked it out of the park in so many different areas that doesn't bother me as much. And it's not like they did the Archon quest bad in my opinion. I think the Archon quest was still great. Its lore on Ochka Natlan, Splanke, the various tribes and their traditions, the heroes, Ubak Khan, the Night Kingdom, and just witnessing the people's constant struggle against the Abyss and actually seeing a massacre happen in real time amplified my love for this region greatly. Hell, even the Traveler himself has become more engraved into Vattian culture with this arc. All top tier stuff, and that really helped me to sympathize with how Capitano felt about the place, being an outsider and all. Now I don't want to just continue like glazing on Natlan, okay? I get it. It's not perfect. There are problems with the arc, mainly that being, like I touched upon earlier, being a plot-driven story makes it lose sight on character focus. Not that it's absent completely, it's just not the focal point for the story they wanted to tell, which is why a lot of the community has a hard time connecting or caring about a lot of the characters. It's still there though, it's just not at the forefront like it was for Navia or Farina, which means it just takes a little bit more extrospection. I don't know if I used that word correctly, but you get what I mean. It takes a little bit more analysis to fully appreciate their characters. The best example of that being Mavuika, who has received a lot of backlash online for being the quote-unquote most boring and uninteresting Archon in the entire game. And I just heavily disagree with that notion. Yeah, she might seem more bland than the others on the surface, but that's kind of what they were going for. It's not a coincidence that one of the only Archons that happens to be human is also portrayed as this perfect being. It's a deliberate writing choice. Being too perfect is Mavuika's weakness, because in doing so, she devalues her own life as a human. That's why the narrative framed her sacrifice more as an act of suicide than a genuine effort to be helpful. The hero's sacrifice, her sister pushing her on even in death, Tupac's last words, and the expectations of the nation. She has so much to live up to that she's forced herself to become a god that'll live up to the being these people envision. But to do that, she has to put her human side in the back seat and focus solely on accomplishing her mission. That's why she may not seem the most interesting character if you look at her on a surface level, which is basically the entire point. She's actually similar to Farina in a lot of ways, One was forced to play the role of a god while the other was forced to become one, both bearing the expectations of their respective nations on their shoulders. Yet at the same time, both are still very different. There are actually quite a few mirror parallels between Fontaine and Natlan that was made prevalent since the nation first dropped. Fire and water, modern tech versus ancient tech, two different portrayals of humans as archons. The creation of new energy, Arche, versus primal energy, Phlogiston. Dead sovereign versus living sovereign. Abyss versus the heavenly principles. Instant death versus resurrection. Farina being so expressive versus Mavuika being more tame, etc. Even Mavuika's biker motif, which is criticized by many, myself included, is packed with a lot of symbolism. Her design and bike aren't just things that are chosen at random, they actually symbolize, well, at least in my interpretation, her constant drive to ride or move forward towards ensuring Natlan's future. With all that being said, I'm not gonna go chasing people down, giving them titty twisters until they agree with my take. I just thought I'd give my perspective on her character, and maybe you found some newfound appreciation for her character. You're free to dislike how she was used in the story or just not like her character overall. I'm not objectively correct here. I just think it's disingenuous to say that she's shallow or lacking depth when it clearly is there. You just have to dig a little deeper to find it. On the whole, I do think that they did most things right for the story that they wanted to tell. Except for one. Capitano. Now, don't get me wrong. I fucking adore Capitano. I have never loved a man this much. I love his character so much, in fact, that I'm beginning to question my own sexuality. He is the fucking goat, man. And that's why it hurts so much what they did with him in the final act. The issue isn't even the ending because, like, come on. Like, the dude fought a silent war for 500 years. While constantly being tormented by the souls of the people he cared about and without sleeping a single day so that he could shove a fucking middle finger up his ass. The fucking god of death. Also, he could just give those souls with him a bit of peace. If that doesn't scream the greatest of all time, I don't know what will. Definition of the GOAT. He is the personification of the word. The problem is how we got to that point. There simply wasn't enough character writing or screen time devoted to him in this patch, in the last patch, the final act of the story, to make the feeling of his sacrifice feel warranted or justified. Because of that, it just feels more like a cheap cop-out to save Mavuika, rather than a noble sacrifice that should have invoked some emotion. Being the #1 Fatui Harbinger and all, I also expected to see a lot more feats from him action-wise, because outside of his fight with Mavuika, we really didn't get a lot of anything. Though his fight with Mavuika was spectacular, I just expected to see a lot more out of someone who's the top Fatui Harbinger, #1, rivaling the Archons. Yes, what he showed was great, but even Arlecchino's transformation alone looked more grand and majestic than whatever Capitano did. Again, not saying it's bad, it just, I don't know, I expected at least a transformation, because Child had his Foul Legacy form, Signora transformed, Arlecchino has her Crimson Moon Dynasty transformation, and then Capitano, #1 Fatui Harbinger, who's supposedly stronger than Arlecchino, just looked worse, in my opinion. What's more disappointing, though, is that there was a clear opportunity for this to happen. The fight with Gozoithoth. Where was he? Why wasn't he present during that fight? It would have been so much more interesting. And Hoyo knows this. They put him on the version art for God's sake. Why would you tease him like that if you're not gonna have him participate? It would have been so good, man. Like, we could have had the Traveler and Mavuika, Capitano working as a team. The dynamic there, the potential was so good. And then we could have more character interactions with Capitano. The weight of his sacrifice would have been more. It would have just alleviated any complaint I would have had. It would have been so fucking perfect, but they dropped the ball there so hard. The only feasible reason I could see that they didn't go down this route is because they're saving Capitano for later. Hoyo isn't stupid. They know that Capitano is gonna sell a shit ton of money, okay? They're already swimming in a fucking ocean of money. Now they're gonna be swimming in a Plano after Capitano is out. So they're gonna obviously release him at some time. He's definitely gonna make it back into the story, especially since there's more to Natlan that was hinted at by the end. We still didn't meet one of the tribes. There's just still more story to tell. And if Capitano is coming back, that means they can showcase what he's capable of. in a better fashion than they did before, like show everything exactly. There's clearly still a lot that can also be explored with Capitano's character here, like how his life was in Conria, his relationship to the Abyss Order sibling. We got a glimpse of that, but there's still a lot that can be expanded there. And why he joined the Fatui in the first place, because that's not really necessary to achieve his original goal, which was to bring these souls and lay them to rest. Ronova just happened to be there and he got super fucking lucky and gave him the middle finger and dipped. But finding Ronova wasn't ever his primary objective, so I'm really curious to see how his relationship to the Heavenly Principle is, because that's the main opposition that the Fatui is facing. Perhaps he joined the Fatui out of disdain for the Heavenly Principles. I mean, he does hate the fuck out of Ronova, as we can clearly see there. So perhaps the Heavenly Principles too, by extension. Point is, there's still stuff to be explored about his characters, so it'll be a real shame if everything is just left to our little noodles up here. Even though it wouldn't have changed how he was treated in the arc, it would retroactively make those issues less egregious, let's say. I forgot to really touch on this, but can we just talk about how fucking sick Gosoithoth is? Easily the best weekly boss we've gotten so far. Not only does he fucking look sick, I mean, who doesn't like dragons, bro? Just the concept alone is so fucking cool. Like the Abyss mimicking the Pyro Sovereign. Wielding two fucking swords, one Abyss sword and one Pyro sword. And throughout the whole fight, it's having this like psychological warfare while being this immensely powerful being. It's so fucking cool, bro. Oh yeah, and it's mimicking the fucking voices of the previous Pyro Archons. Like, what? You just have an amalgamation of such cool concepts. And it's so thematically fitting too, because these voices, it's like you're fighting Natlan's past, and in order to break through and ensure a new future for Natlan, you have to defeat its foe. I don't know who came up with this concept, this idea. Give them a raise, bro. Give them a fucking raise right now. Holy shit. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about Natlan. More than the story, I just love the world and the characters and the overall environment that Hoyo has given us here. I am iffy on the character designs, but the music is second to Sumeru. Best quality of life, best weekly boss, some of the most gorgeous environments I've ever seen. It's a really fun story, and yeah, could it have been better in some aspects? For sure, the pacing could have been better in some areas. They could have handled characters differently. But did it deliver on most aspects? Hell yeah. I think this story was very, very fun. I enjoyed my time a lot. Personally, I'm giving it a 9.3 out of 10. But what do you guys think? Did you like Natlan? Did you hate it? Did you dislike it? Did you love it? What do you rate Natlan overall? I'd love to hear all your thoughts. But yeah, that's about it for me. Like, subscribe, all that jazz, and I will see you all in the next one. See ya.